In Delhi, the past constantly intrudes onto the present, and the past is enacted against the backdrop of the present. There's something dramatic, a certain theatricality about Delhi. This has to do with the fact that the city has for long served as India's capital. Thus, it's acquired a pomposity that's evident in many of its prominent edifices. It's said that Delhi's been built and razed and rebuilt 7 times. Each time the city has risen, phoenix-like from its ashes, absorbing something of the past into its bustling present. Indeed, in many respects, Delhi is an appropriate metaphor for India itself. It represents the paradoxes and varieties of India, its many threads woven into a pluralistic culture. During the several centuries of its existence, the city has seen the many ups and downs of the country's political history.
The reason for Delhi's importance in history lies in its geography. Wave after wave of immigrants and invaders came into the Indian subcontinent from the passes in the northwest. They easily crossed the plains of the Punjab, but then they came across a bottleneck. This bottleneck was Delhi. Delhi has to its west the great Thar Desert flanked by the Aravalli Hills. And on its east lies the Yamuna River. All invaders had to pass through this bottleneck in order to reach the soft underbelly of what got to be known as Hindustan.
Control over Delhi was necessary to rule over India, and the citizens of Delhi shared in ruling over India. They built a culture and civilization in which the popular and classical traditions coexist. Even the legendary Mahabharata locates its happenings in Delhi and the area surrounding it. The old fort or the Purana Killa is said to stand at the site of the fabled palaces of the Mahabharata. Archaeological excavations have not unearthed anything spectacular, at least not enough to match the poetic license with which the Indraprastha of the Pandavas is described in the great epic. However, archaeologists have proved that Delhi was continuously inhabited since the very dawn of human civilization. Stone tools have been found at these quarries in Anangpur village. These testify to an ancient prehistoric past. The village itself typifies the rural existence which has continued for centuries. For a long period, Delhi was not a glorious capital of kingdoms and empires. Its importance lay in trade and other services. This neglected monument, situated just across the road from this wholesale market at Okhla, reminds us of the importance of trade in the history of Delhi. This is a rock inscription carved in the 3rd century before Christ on the orders of the great Mauryan emperor Ashoka. The righteous emperor had it carved so that passing traders and caravaneers would read and remember his injunctions. Today, this is counted as one of Ashok's minor rock inscriptions and languishes in neglect. The Mauryans never had a significant presence in Delhi. It was Patliputra, now known as Patna, which was the capital of the Mauryas and of several subsequent dynasties. However, since independent India adopted the symbols of the righteous Mauryan state, New Delhi is replete with symbols of Ashoka the Great. The historical legacy of Ashoka, the great Mauryan emperor, is best represented through the magnificent Ashokan pillars in Delhi. One stands on the Delhi Ridge. The other towers over the remains of the Firoz Shah Kotla, a citadel built in the 14th century by a Tughlaq Sultan who named it after himself. Firoz Shah Tughlaq was so enchanted by this wonderful artifact of ancient India that he had it transported from far and re-erected here with great care. None could tell the Sultan what it was. Muslim scholars said that it was the handiwork of jinns, and Hindu Pandits described it as the walking stick of Bhim. There's another pillar in Delhi which also symbolizes imperial power. The iron pillar at Mehrauli stands unrusted through the ages, proof of the wondrous metallurgical knowledge of those who cast it. The inscription on it places it in the time of the Gupta king Chandragupta Vikramaditya, who ruled in the 4th century AD. This pillar too was not erected originally in Delhi, but was brought here at some time in the hoary past. Subsequently, it became the focal point of many buildings that grew around it. During India's long twilight period between large empires, the area around Delhi was ruled by a Rajput clan known as the Tomars. They ruled from their fort known as Lal Kot, whose archaeological remains near the Kutub Minar have only recently been excavated. Delhi regained its strategic importance when the threat from the northwest increased. This threat intensified during the reign of Prithviraj Chauhan. The fort of Prithviraj lay behind this wall that uneasily intrudes onto Delhi's present today. In the winter of 1190, Prithviraj Chauhan's army lost Delhi to Muhammad Ghori. The city became the capital of the Delhi Sultanate, which has left behind many monuments in the city.
Ordinary people come and go from the world and don't leave a mark, but rulers always want to leave monuments to themselves. And since Delhi has been the seat of many rulers, the whole landscape of the city is dotted with monuments. And of all the monuments in Delhi, perhaps the most interesting
Most impressive and certainly the most intriguing is the Kutub Minar.
Work on the tower was started by Qutbuddin Aibak, Muhammad Ghori's slave and general. Construction of the minar was carried on by Qutbuddin's successor, Iltutmish. The last 2 stories of the lofty tower, in white marble rather than red sandstone, were added by a much later Sultan, Firoz Shah Tughlaq. Even the British tried their craft on the Kutub Minar. They put an incongruous canopy atop the tower. The ridiculous addition to their beloved monument was laughed off by the citizens of Delhi. The British canopy, today known as Smith's Folly, lies forgotten in an obscure corner of the Qutub complex. The Qutub has survived all such outrages. The Kutub Minar has even outlived an attempt to dwarf it. The grandiose Sultan Alauddin Khilji initiated the construction of an even taller tower, the Alai Minar. That tower could not be completed. It merely monuments one man's megalomania. However, there was more to Alauddin than only grandeur. He took on the Mongols. One of the major challenges to India and to Delhi in particular came during the period from the dreaded Mongols. They'd swept through much of Europe and Asia and made repeated forays into India too. The Mongols met their match in Alauddin Khilji. He took them on in battle outside the Siri fort which he built. Beating back the Mongol threat gave Alauddin the opportunity to establish a centralized empire. His kingdom radiated from the capital in Delhi and extended deep into southern India. However, before Delhi settled down as the capital of India, it faced several upheavals. The most severe occurred during the reign of Muhammad bin Tughlaq. He started his rule from the Tughlaqabad fort when his father Ghiyasuddin died suddenly and mysteriously. Ghiyasuddin was buried in a soldier's tomb nearby. And Muhammad, the son of Tughlaq, built his own version of Delhi and called it Jahanpana, the refuge of the world. The multi-domed Begumpuri Mosque was the centerpiece of this city. However, the grand city was devastated by its own founder, the brilliant but erratic Muhammad bin Tughlaq himself. The Sultan decided to shift his capital from Delhi to Deogiri in the south. He decreed that every resident of Delhi, even the blind and the lame, must make the long journey. The act seems preposterous today, but there was actually a logic to it. Despite the measures taken by strong sultans like Alauddin Khilji, Delhi was still threatened by the ferocious Mongol hordes. Deogiri seemed a safer site for a capital. It was also almost at the geographical center of the concept of India that was emerging. Muhammad bin Tughlaq was also uneasy about the emergence of the Muslim Bahmani kingdoms in the peninsula and wanted to keep a proximate eye on them. Thus, Deogiri, which was renamed Daulatabad, was preferred over Delhi. As it happened, nature foiled the Sultan's plans. there was just not enough water around Daulatabad. And the weary subjects of the Sultan soon found themselves taking the long way back to Delhi. This time the Adilabad fort built by Muhammad bin Tughlaq flourished. Even as this happened, another dynamic of Indian politics began unfolding itself. That concerned the relationship between the centre and the peripheral areas, between Delhi and the provinces. The centre-state issue remains contentious even today.
There is a basic conflict going on all the time, not so much between Hindus and Muslims and things like that, but between the central authority and the intermediaries, whether they are the nobles or the zamindars, and naturally it is of the share of power. So wherever you find that the king is weak and the other factors in power, the forces in power like the ulama, the nobles, they come in, they are lavished praise. Because after all, this means that this group as such of the establishment is able to prosper.
There was also a constant tussle during the Sultanate between the secular needs of the state and the role of religion. Many grand mosques like this intriguing Khirki Masjid were built in Delhi during that period. But the issue of who would dominate, the Sultan or the Imam, was never conclusively resolved. Muhammad bin Tughlaq took on the Islamic clergy, the ulama. He tried to restrict the influence of the Maulvis to the mosques. On the other hand, the Sultan Firoz Shah Tughlaq was much loved by the Muslim clergy. The reign of Firoz Shah Tughlaq marked a dramatic increase in corruption, a phenomenon that has plagued India's capital for centuries. Not entirely surprisingly, the rise in bribery was encouraged by acts of those occupying the very top of the political pyramid.
During the time of Muhammad bin Tughlaq, hundreds of thousands, in fact crores of rupees had been given in loan to people to develop modern agricultural farms. Now not only Firoz Shah Tughlaq completely waived all the loan, but also in a public function, all the records in which the loans were given were brought and washed in a tub of water.
Such fiscal profligacy would have been the nightmare of monetarists, if any had existed then. In any case, the empire was considerably weakened, and in many respects, Delhi became a necropolis. At the Lodi Gardens, several tombs of the Lodi and Sayyid kings remind Delhi's elite of human mortality. Delhi lost its political preeminence for quite some time. This was after the Lodhis were defeated by the Mughals, led by Babur, in the first battle of Panipat. Babur's son Humayun did select Delhi once again to locate his headquarters. He began the construction of the fort, which is known as the Purana Kila. Humayun's reign itself was interrupted by that of Sher Shah Suri. Although Sher Shah built his magnificent mausoleum in his native Sasaram in Bihar, he too kept Delhi as his capital. He completed the ramparts of the Purana Kila and built many structures like this mosque inside the fort. A few years after Sher Shah died in an accident, Humayun returned once again to Delhi. to re-establish the Mughal Empire in India. He himself died soon after, and the only lasting memorial to him is his magnificent tomb. Humayun's tomb, built during the reign of Akbar the Great, is in fact the architectural predecessor of the Taj Mahal. After the death of his beloved queen Mumtaz Mahal, Shah Jahan decided to move his capital from Agra to Delhi. He decided to build yet another city at Delhi and to call it Shah Jahanabad. The Red Fort in the new capital city was the centerpiece of Shah Jahanabad. But even during its most glorious period, the Red Fort was already witnessing the signs of the decline of the Mughal Empire. The struggle for the peacock throne between the four sons of Shah Jahan was one such indication. When eventually, after a bloody fight, Aurangzeb took over as emperor, he expressed his religious and political orientation even through architecture. He did not have much use for public appearances. Even the public congregation in the Jama Masjid. He built the beautiful Moti Masjid inside the fort for private prayers by the emperor. Aurangzeb also constructed an addition to the Lahori Gate of Red Fort, preventing the people from getting a view of the emperor in the Diwani Arm. He thereby increased the distance between the ruler and the ruled, a sure sign of decline of the regime. It's difficult today to visualize the splendor of the palaces in the Red Fort described by earlier visitors. The magnificent carpets, wall hangings of silk and velvet, ceilings of silver are all gone. The inlay of precious stones was ripped from the pillars by plunderers. The fabulous golden peacock throne was carried away by the Iranian raider Nadir Shah in 1739. Muhammad Shah Rangila, the emperor immersed in his life of debauchery, was unable to prevent the terrible massacre of the citizens of Delhi. Other grand edifices too were cannibalized by those who captured power. A case of such vandalism is provided by the tomb of Abdul Rahim Khani Khana, scholar, warrior and poet. He was one of the jewels of Akbar's court. It's one of the cruel ironies of history that his tomb was to be later stripped of its marble to decorate the ostentatious tomb of Nawab Safdarjung, a member of the powerful aristocracy that grew during the time of the later Mughals. He built this ornate mausoleum for himself even as the sun was setting over the Mughal Empire. The British formally took over the governance of India after suppressing the Great Revolt of 1857. They vandalized the Red Fort, the magnificent Mughal gardens were destroyed. British barracks took the place of sumptuous royal buildings. The last of the Mughals, Bahadur Shah Zafar, was tried of all charges for treason. India was added to the British crown as its brightest jewel. But for half a century, the glitter of the empire shifted from Delhi to Calcutta, which became the capital of British India. However, it was not long before the capital returned to Delhi. These forlorn statues stand in what's known as the Coronation Park in Delhi. The ground was once the venue of a massive darbar organized by the British in December 1911. It was at that imperial gathering that King George V announced the shifting of the capital once again to Delhi. He decreed the foundation of yet another city in what had been India's capital for centuries. The New Delhi of the British ultimately came up at some distance from the place where its foundation was first planned. The foundation stone had to be shifted later to its present site in the Secretariat complex. The axis of the British capital was a straight line that traversed three historical monuments. The Viceroys Palace was perched above the Kingsway, now known as Rajpath, with the mansions of the native princes clustered around its feet. The Kingsway was intersected by Queensway, today known as Janpath or the People's Path. The whole idea of the architecture was to convey power, glory, and imperial durability.
The British included many Indian architectural elements in their design of New Delhi. This was to suggest that the empire was integrated with the people. The real point, of course, was to establish imperial majesty. The buildings were located on Raisina Hill and therefore they towered over the city. It is another matter that very shortly after the British built these buildings, the empire went away and the Indian Republic was established.
Delhi became the capital of free India. And the saga of Delhi as India's capital city, built time and again, goes on.